Have you ever felt stuck? Like really stuck?
Hmm.
Like the life you were living just wasn't yours.
Hmm.
Now imagine that feeling, but magnified 1,000 times.
Yeah.
Being trapped in a system designed to strip you of your freedom and your humanity.
Wow.
That was the reality Harriet Tubman faced.
Right.
And yet she not only found the strength to escape, but she dedicated her life to helping others do the same.
Absolutely.
You've shared some truly amazing sources about Harriet Tubman's life.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm excited to really dive deep into her story.
It's an incredible story. And what's often overlooked is that Harriet Tubman's story isn't just about one woman's courage.
Right.
It's about the resilience of the human spirit
Yeah,
in the face of unimaginable oppression. It's a story that forces us to confront the darkest chapters of American history
for sure.
and reminds us of the ongoing fight for equality that continues to this day.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
It's easy to see Harriet Tubman as this, iconic figure,
Right.
but sometimes we forget the real human being
Yeah.
behind the legend. So let's start at the beginning. She was born into slavery in Dorchester County, Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
around 1822, right?
Yes. And her early life was marked by incredible hardship.
Yeah,
From a young age, she was forced to endure brutal working conditions,
I can imagine.
experiencing firsthand the cruelty of the slave system.
Right,
And it's important to remember that this wasn't just hard work.
right.
It was a system designed to dehumanize and exploit people for profit.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about a child enduring that kind of treatment.
It is.
One of the sources mentions a particularly horrific incident
Yes.
where she was struck in the head with a heavy weight
Right.
while trying to protect another enslaved person.
That incident had a profound impact on Harriet,
Oh, I bet.
both physically and emotionally.
Yeah.
She suffered from seizures and headaches for the rest of her life,
Wow.
but it also ignited a fierce determination within her
Yeah.
to fight for her freedom and the freedom of others.
It really speaks to her strength of character,
Right.
Instead of breaking her spirit, this traumatic experience fueled her desire for liberation.
Yeah,
She became obsessed with the idea of escape,
right.
inspired by stories of the Underground Railroad,
Mm-hmm.
and fueled by her own deep sense of justice.
The desire for freedom was so strong among enslaved people
Yeah.
that even though there were harsh penalties for escape attempts,
Sure.
many still risked everything for a chance at a better life.
Absolutely.
And the Underground Railroad, this clandestine network of safe houses and secret routes,
Right.
offered a glimmer of hope for those seeking liberation.
It's incredible to think about the courage it took for those involved in the Underground Railroad,
Yeah,
both those escaping and those risking their own freedom to help.
absolutely.
So when did Harriet make her first attempt at escape?
Her first attempt was in September of 1849,
Okay.
when she was about 27 years old. She initially planned to escape with her brothers Ben and Henry,
Okay.
but they got scared and backed out.
Can you imagine the emotional turmoil of that moment?
So,
To be so close to freedom, only to have your hope dashed by fear.
right.
It must have been incredibly difficult for Harriet to decide whether to go back with them or continue on alone.
Think about the psychological pressure on her brothers, too. They were caught between the desperate yearning for freedom
Right.
and the terrifying consequences of being caught.
Absolutely.
The Fugitive Slave Act, passed just a few years earlier,
Yeah.
meant that even if they reached the North, they could still be captured and returned to slavery.
That's right. The Fugitive Slave Act really intensified the risks for anyone trying to escape.
Absolutely.
It essentially made it a federal crime to help runaway slaves.
Yeah,
So even people in free states could be punished for aiding them.
exactly.
So imagine Harriet's dilemma.
Right.
Does she succumb to the fear that paralyzed her brothers?
Right.
Or does she trust her instincts and push forward alone?
It's a testament to her unwavering resolve that she chose the latter.
She really was fearless.
Yeah.
So tell me about that second escape attempt. How did she manage to make it to freedom?
Armed with her knowledge of the Maryland marshes and guided by the North Star,
Oh,
Harriet embarked on her solitary journey.
wow.
She traveled by night, hiding during the day, relying on her wits and the kindness of strangers who were part of the Underground Railroad.
It's hard to fathom the level of bravery that took. Every step must have been filled with danger and uncertainty. Was there anyone in particular who helped her along the way?
The Underground Railroad was a network of ordinary people, black and white,
Right?
free and enslaved,
Yeah.
who put their lives on the line to help others escape.
Wow.
They provided food, shelter, and guidance, often at great personal risk.
Yeah,
Harriet encountered many such individuals along her journey,
I bet.
each playing a vital role in her eventual success.
It's amazing how this network operated in secrecy,
Right.
defying the law and risking everything for the cause of freedom.
It is.
So what was it like for Harriet when she finally reached Pennsylvania?
Reaching freedom must have been an overwhelming mix of emotions.
Oh, I can imagine.
Relief, joy, but also a profound sense of loneliness and loss.
Yeah.
She was free, but she had left everything and everyone she knew behind.
Yeah.
And that, for Harriet, was just the beginning.
Wait, well, what do you mean just the beginning? She had escaped slavery, reached freedom.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that have been the end goal?
For Harriet, freedom wasn't just about personal liberation.
Oh.
It was about the liberation of her people.
Wow.
She couldn't bear the thought of others suffering the same fate she had endured.
Right.
And so she made a decision that would define the rest of her life.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. I can't wait to hear what she did next. But I think it's a good place to pause and let our listeners absorb everything we've covered so far.
Harriet's story really takes a remarkable turn here.
Yeah.
Imagine escaping from this oppressive system,
Yeah.
tasting freedom for the first time,
Right.
and then choosing to go back.
Wow.
Not just once,
Yeah.
but repeatedly risking everything to help others escape the same nightmare.
It's unbelievable.
That's exactly what Harriet did.
That's almost unbelievable. It's one thing to escape yourself,
Right.
but to willingly go back into the heart of danger,
Yeah.
to face the very people who enslaved you, that takes extraordinary kind of courage.
It does.
What drove her to do that?
It was that profound sense of empathy and justice that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Having experienced the horrors of slavery firsthand, she couldn't stand by and watch others suffer the same fate.
Right.
It became her mission to liberate as many people as possible,
Wow.
to share that taste of freedom she had fought so hard to achieve.
So she essentially became a conductor on the Underground Railroad,
Exactly.
guiding others along those secret routes to freedom.
Exactly. She made about 13 trips back to the South,
Wow.
leading hundreds of people to safety.
That's incredible.
She became known as Moses,
Right.
a fitting nickname given her role in leading her people out of bondage.
Yeah.
It's important to understand the significance of that name.
Okay.
It resonated deeply with the enslaved community,
Yeah.
drawing a parallel between their struggle for freedom and the biblical story of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt.
It's a powerful image, isn't it?
It is.
Harriet, like Moses, facing down a powerful enemy,
Yeah.
guiding her people to a promised land of liberty. But didn't she face incredible dangers on these missions?
Absolutely.
Slave owners offered huge rewards for her capture, didn't they?
Absolutely. She was a highly wanted fugitive,
Right.
and slave catchers were constantly on the lookout for her.
I can imagine.
She had to be incredibly resourceful and cunning,
Yeah.
using disguises, changing routes, and relying on her network of contacts to evade capture.
Wow.
There are stories of her hiding in plain sight,
Really?
pretending to be an elderly woman,
Wow.
or even singing loudly to distract pursuers.
It sounds like she was always one step ahead,
She was very clever.
outsmarting those who sought to recapture her and those she was helping escape.
Right.
But it couldn't have been easy constantly living on the edge,
No.
knowing that one wrong move could have disastrous consequences.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just physical danger she faced.
Right.
There was also the emotional toll of leaving loved ones behind.
Oh.
The constant fear of being betrayed and the heartbreak of seeing others captured and returned to slavery.
Of course.
One particularly poignant story involves her attempt to bring her husband, John Tubman, north to freedom.
What happened? Did he refuse to go with her?
He had actually remarried while she was away.
Oh, wow.
He had likely assumed she was never coming back,
Right.
and he had moved on with his life.
Yeah,
It must have been a devastating blow for Harriet,
I bet.
a stark reminder of the personal sacrifices she was making in her fight for freedom.
It's a heartbreaking reminder that even amidst these heroic acts,
Right?
there was immense personal loss and sacrifice.
Yes,
It's important to acknowledge that human side of her story,
absolutely.
the emotional complexities she must have grappled with.
Yeah.
But as you said, she never wavered in her commitment to her mission. And then in 1861, the Civil War breaks out, and Harriet finds a new way to contribute to the fight for freedom.
The outbreak of the Civil War was a turning point for Harriet and for the nation as a whole.
Yeah.
She recognized that this conflict presented a unique opportunity to strike a blow against slavery, and she quickly aligned herself with the Union cause.
So she essentially went from being a conductor on the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
to being a soldier in the fight for freedom.
In a way, yes.
What role did she play in the war?
She served in a variety of capacities,
Okay.
utilizing her unique skills and knowledge to aid the Union Army.
Right.
She worked as a nurse tending to wounded soldiers, both black and white.
Wow.
She also used her intimate knowledge of the Southern landscape and
Yeah.
her ability to move undetected
Right.
to become a valuable spy for the Union forces.
It's incredible how she constantly adapted to new challenges,
She did.
finding ways to contribute to the cause of freedom, no matter the circumstances. But there's one event in particular that stands out during her time with the Union Army. The Combahee River Raid.
Ah, yes, the Combahee River Raid.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable event, a testament to Harriet's audacity and her unwavering commitment to liberating her people. It takes place on June 1st, 1863, and it's an event that deserves its own careful consideration.
Before we dive into that incredible story, I think it's a good place to pause and let our listeners process everything we've covered so far.
Yeah.
Harriet's life is a whirlwind of courage and determination, and it's important to take a moment to reflect on her incredible journey.
Yep.
So we left off with Harriet Tubman finding these new ways to fight for freedom during the Civil War, serving as a nurse, a spy, and, really using her knowledge of the South to aid the Union Army.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the Combahee River Raid as a particularly significant event.
It was.
Can you tell us more about that?
The Combahee River Raid was a daring military operation led by Harriet Tubman that took place on June 1st, 1863. It was remarkable not only for its strategic success, but also for its symbolic importance. Imagine this. Harriet, on a Union gunship, sailing down the Combahee River in South Carolina,
Wow.
deep into Confederate territory.
Yeah.
And she's not just a passenger.
Oh, yeah.
She's the one leading this mission.
Wait, she was in charge.
Yes.
So she wasn't just helping out. She was actually commanding this raid.
That's right. She was the mastermind behind the operation,
Wow.
using her intelligence network and knowledge of the terrain to plan and execute this daring mission.
That's incredible.
It made her the first woman in U.S. history to lead an armed military assault.
That's unbelievable. It's one thing to be courageous and escape slavery,
Right.
but to then lead a military operation against the very forces that oppressed you.
I know.
That's on a whole other level.
Yeah.
What was the goal of this raid?
The Combahee River Raid had multiple objectives. The primary goal was to disrupt Confederate supply lines
Okay.
and weaken their hold on the region. But for Harriet, there was a deeply personal element to this mission, liberating as many enslaved people as possible.
So it's a military operation with a humanitarian mission at its heart.
Exactly.
Can you walk us through how it unfolded?
Sure.
What was it like for those involved?
As the Union gunship approached plantations along the riverbank,
Okay.
Harriet, standing on the deck, would call out to the enslaved people working in the fields,
Wow.
urging them to escape and join them. Imagine hearing that voice,
Yeah.
cutting through the stillness, a voice promising freedom in the midst of such despair.
Yeah, it must have been an incredible moment for those working in the fields.
Oh, absolutely.
To suddenly see a Union ship, to hear Harriet Tubman's voice calling them to freedom.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine the emotions they must have felt. Did everyone just run towards the ship?
Not everyone was immediately convinced. Years of oppression and fear made some hesitant to trust the promise of freedom,
Right?
but as more and more people started making their way towards the riverbank,
Yeah.
the fear began to give way to hope and a desperate longing for liberation. Hundreds of men, women, and children carrying what few possessions they could rushed towards the river,
Wow.
their eyes fixed on the Union ship.
It must have been chaotic.
It was.
How did Harriet manage to keep things under control to make sure everyone could board safely?
There was a moment when it seemed like things might descend into chaos. People were desperate to escape, pushing and shoving to get onto the small boats sent to ferry them to the safety of the gunship.
I can imagine.
But Harriet, with her characteristic calm and presence of mind, did something unexpected. She began to sing.
She started singing.
Yes.
In the middle of all that commotion. Why?
Her powerful voice cut through the fear and confusion,
Wow.
calming the crowds and reminding them of their shared purpose. It was a stroke of genius. She used music,
Yeah.
a cornerstone of African-American culture and a source of strength and resilience to restore order and instill a sense of unity.
That's a really incredible testament to her leadership. To think that in a moment of such chaos, she was able to use something as simple as song to bring about order and hope.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So in the end, was the Combahee River Raid a success?
The raid was a resounding success on multiple fronts. It disrupted Confederate supply lines,
Okay.
dealt a blow to their morale,
Yeah.
And most importantly, it liberated over 750 enslaved people.
Wow.
750 lives transformed, 750 journeys towards freedom begun because of Harriet Tubman's bravery and leadership.
That's an amazing achievement.
It is.
It's hard to overstate the impact of that single event, both in terms of its immediate success and its long-term significance.
Absolutely.
But the war didn't end there, did it? What did Harriet do after the Combahee River raid?
She continued to work for the Union cause, using her skills as a spy and a nurse, always pushing for the full realization of freedom for her people. Even after the war ended and slavery was officially abolished in 1865, she didn't stop fighting for equality and justice.
It seems like her fight for freedom was a lifelong mission. Something that went beyond the immediate goal of ending slavery. What did that fight look like after the Civil War?
Harriet dedicated her later years to advocating for civil rights and social justice. She campaigned for women's suffrage, recognizing the interconnectedness of these struggles for equality.
Right.
She worked to establish schools and hospitals for freedmen, understanding that true freedom required more than just the absence of chains.
That's a really important point.
It is.
It wasn't enough to simply declare people free. They needed access to education, healthcare, and economic opportunities to truly thrive.
Absolutely.
Harriet recognized this and worked tirelessly to address those needs. It's almost tragic that despite all she accomplished, she died in poverty in 1913.
It is a sad fact. It's a sobering reminder of the systemic inequalities that persisted even after the abolition of slavery.
Yeah.
It highlights the long road to true equality and the need for continued vigilance and action to dismantle systems of oppression.
So as we near the end of our deep dive into Harriet Tubman's extraordinary life, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with?
Harriet Tubman's story is a powerful testament to the human spirit's capacity for courage, resilience, and compassion. It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, individuals can make a difference, and that the fight for justice and equality is a collective responsibility that we all share.
Well said. It's been an honor to delve into Harriet Tubman's life and legacy with you. Her story is one that deserves to be told and retold, reminding us of the power of courage, the importance of empathy, and the enduring fight for a just and equitable world.
The honor was all mine. Until next time.